More details are emerging now about why Anders Breivik set off a car bomb next to a government building in downtown Oslo last Friday and then drove to a political youth retreat on a remote island and gunned down nearly 70 teenagers to cap off the worst day of violence the nation of Norway has seen since World War II. Turns out Breivik was taking his orders from the very same right-wingers who are spewing hate here in the United States. Breivik's 1,500-page manifesto included several references to well-known American cranks like Pamela Geller, Frank Gaffney, and David Horowitz. The manifesto also cited right-wing American organizations like the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, the Middle East Media Research Institute, and Pajamas Media. Basically, the manifesto reads like a who's who of radical right-wing bloggers, pundits, and phony experts who set up shop not in Norway, but right here in America to spread fear and hatred of Muslims. Breivik also used his manifesto to attack climate change, citing how the 2009 so-called ClimateGate scandal proved that man-made climate change is a hoax. It's unclear if Breivik arrived at that conclusion by watching Fox News' endless stream of coverage devoted to so-called ClimateGate, but what is clear is a lot of the arguments and ideas Breivik claims motivated him can be heard every single day on Fox News and the rest of the right-wing media. So what we have here is a frightened and angry man who lashed out at his progressive Norwegian government with unspeakable violence and who got many of his ideas from the very same people who are fomenting hate against Muslims and progressives here in America. And it could be just a matter of time before the senseless violence of last week in Norway crosses the Atlantic and hits our shores. The organization People for the American Way just released a report on what they are calling the right-wing playbook on anti-Muslim extremism. Included in this report is a section titled 8 Key Strategies Employed by the Right to Inflame Anti-Muslim Sentiment and Turn Hatred and Bigotry into Political Weapons. And as we saw in Norway, that strategy can yield violent, unintended consequences, transforming political weapons into actual weapons. So let's take a look at it. Strategy 1, frame Muslim Americans as dangerous to America. This one is fairly obvious. What better way to highlight the danger of Muslim Americans than to have a sitting Republican congressman use his power as chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee to launch hearings into the radicalization of American Muslim communities. Yeah, this is exactly what Peter King is doing, with the support of his entire party.
I believe it's important to have this investigation on radicalization of the Muslim community. We've seen what happened in England. We know that al-Qaeda is trying to recruit people over here, such as they did with the subway bombing in New York last year, the attempted subway bombing, Times Square bombing. These are all people living legally in the United States.
Not to mention the countless times that Fox News has spread the fear of American Muslims.
Not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslim.
If you are an 18 to 28-year-old Muslim man, then you should be strip searched. And if we don't do that, there's a very high probability we're going to lose an airline.
So once the fear is established, once we're all afraid that the Muslims are going to take down our airplanes, then you have to back it up with research, which brings us to the second part of the right-wing plan, Strategy 2, twist statistics and use fake research to prove the Muslim threat. Remember at the end of last year when Glenn Beck gave this very unscientific analysis of Muslims and terrorism?
What is the number of Islamic terrorists? 1%? I think it's closer to 10%, but the rest of the PC world will tell you, oh, no, it's minuscule.
Not even close, Glenn. It actually is minuscule. But by the way our nation focuses on Islamic terror, you'd think Glenn was right. But the truth is, Muslims are the least of our nation's worries when it comes to terrorism. As this chart, based on FBI data, shows, only 6% of terrorist attacks, 6%, between 1980 and 2005 were carried out by Islamic terrorists. Just 6%. Yet just this month, right-winger David Yerushalmi released a scientific study alleging that 81% of U.S. mosques feature texts that support violence. You can find similar language in the Bible, by the way. It was picked up by numerous online right-wing blogs, including many of the same blogs that Breivik was reading. Of course, this study had no scientific evidence whatsoever to support it, and the guy who wrote it, David Yerushalmi, had a history of anti-Muslim writings and is behind a lot of the anti-Sharia law legislation that is sweeping the country. Which brings us to strategy 3. Invent the danger of creeping Sharia. As I said, a number of Republican-controlled state legislatures around the country have passed laws in the last year or so banning the practice of Sharia law in America. Like there's a big movement to make it happen, right? Also, a number of prominent conservative commentators and politicians have warned us of the dangers of Sharia law.
What the stealth jihad agenda is all about is exactly that, bringing in piece by piece and bit by bit elements of Islamic law and reinforcing the principle in all of these small incidents that whenever Islamic law and American law or custom collide, it is American law that has to give way and Islamic law that has to be accommodated by American authorities and institutions.
Most dangerous scenario is that radical Muslims seize power and put Sharia law into place.
So give me the scenario that makes this necessary in Oklahoma.
CARE's mission statement, they're not here just to be one of many religions, but here to be the dominant religion.
Get the picture? Then there are strategies 4, 5, and 6 of this right-wing plan for us all to fear Muslims, which are defend liberty by taking freedoms away from Muslims, claim that Islam is not a religion, and maintain that Muslims have no First Amendment rights under the Constitution. As in, stop Muslims from building mosques and worshiping openly in the United States. Remember what Herman Cain said recently about the mosque controversy in Murfreesboro, Tennessee?
Islam is both a religion and a set of laws, Sharia law. That's the difference between any one of our other traditional religions where it's just about religious purposes. The people in the community know best. And I happen to side with the people in the community.
So you're saying any community, if they want to ban a mosque?
Yes, they have the right to do that.
It's apparently a guy who never heard of the Ten Commandments. Anyhow, how Fox News and conservative talk radio whipped up opposition to what they called the Ground Zero Victory Mosque, a phrase, by the way, that's only ever been used by right-wingers.
The idea that our men and women are serving overseas, fighting for freedom, and you're going to put a monument to the terrorists at the site of 9/11? I'm sorry, that's not the way the First Amendment works.
You want to build a Allah tells me to blow up America mosque. Yeah, I got a real problem with that.
So is it your view that the mosque is being funded by terrorists?
We have to investigate that. The background of the people who are coming forward is definitely questionable.
This is an actual danger. This is a danger because we now have evidence that there's something else going on here, and we cannot reject our gut.
They want to build a victory monument. And we can't say no to that because somehow we've got to preserve our values.
It's all part of the plan. Declare that Islam is not a religion, then take away freedom from Muslims because they don't have a legitimate claim to the First Amendment, essentially making Muslims second-class citizens in the United States. Once they're second-class citizens, what's the big deal if you attack or even kill them? Then there's strategy 7. Link anti-Muslim prejudice to anti-Obama rhetoric. See if we can kind of squeeze Obama into the Muslim mold. Well, now we know where the whole Obama is a Muslim idea came from. Or the whole Obama has anti-American beliefs idea came from.
It is totally absurd. It's beyond belief that a president of the United States would say that, and it shows that Barack Obama might be the first anti-American president we've ever had.
I think the people that Barack Obama has been associating with are anti-American by and large. The people who are radical leftists. I'm focusing on Barack Obama and the people that he's been associating with.
But do you suspect that a lot of people you serve with?
Their anti-American nature.
Well, he's a United States.
For the record, Obama's a Christian, not a Muslim, which brings us to the final strategy. And it's weird that I even have to say that, but, you know, about half of the Republican Party thinks he's Muslim. Anyhow, which brings us to the final story, and that's the one that's most pertinent to what we saw in Norway. Strategy 8. Claim an unholy alliance that exists and includes Muslims and other groups targeted by the right wing. After all, if you can prove an unholy alliance, then it makes the progressives just as guilty as the Islamic terrorists, thus justifying violence against progressives, as we saw in Norway on Friday. What we're seeing with this hate campaign carried out by the radical Islamophobic right is terrorism. It's a unique form of terrorism known as stochastic terrorism. Stochastic terrorism is defined as using mass communications like TV, the internet, and radio to encourage lone wolves, whether or not they're mentally ill, lone wolves, to commit random acts of violence along your political lines. It's what bin Laden used to do when he released his videotapes, hoping that some troubled person would get the message and carry out a suicide attack. It's also what Bill O'Reilly is guilty of when he devoted several shows to calling abortion doctor George Tiller, Tiller the baby killer. Someone eventually got the message and shot George Tiller to death. It's what Glenn Beck is guilty of when he mentioned the Tides Foundation 29 times on his TV show, calling the organization part of a liberal conspiracy. That prompted Byron Williams to stock his car full of ammunition and drive to San Francisco on a mission to murder everyone at the Tides Foundation. Luckily, he was stopped on the way and was arrested after he fired more than 200 rounds into police cars and wounded 2 police officers. This is what the what the people behind the anti-Muslim hate machine want. They want their message to be heard by lone wolf crazies willing to act on the warnings. Tragically for Norway, those words fell on the ears of Anders Breivik. And if we don't start calling these inciters of violence what they are, the next mass murder may happen here in the U.S.